Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome to Wake Up with Sonia Poulton and guests. It is Monday, the 10th of November, 2025, exactly 9 a.m. GMT. And I'm already losing my voice. How are you? Good morning to you all. Welcome to the show that works harder than David Beckham did in trying to get his knighthood, but we are altogether less sycophantic and creepy. On today's show, we will be joined by Evelyn McColgan of Partisan Defence Committee. She'll be talking to us about the Lucy Letby protest that took place on Friday outside the CCRC. We'll also be joined by filmmaker Mazimo Mizuko, who will be talking to us from his perspective as a photographer about the fake moon landing. And we will also be joined by one of our favourites around here, geopolitical journalist Warren Thornton, who will be talking to us about typhoons, Trump, Putin, and more. Plus, we have a court roundup, Julia Wandelt and Joey Barton. And BBC's propaganda has finally caught up with them. Hooray, hooray, hooray. And Southport killings. Could Axel Rudakabana have been stopped? US Congress is after Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor. COP30 is on this week. Hoax on a global scale, frankly. And the mystery of 3i Atlas. What are we looking at here exactly? And our final thought today is the trick is to make you feel powerless, but not round here, kids. Oh, no, indeed. We do news different on Wake Up. And you know why? Because someone had to. And how are you today? I hope you are well. And thank you already for your early super chats, you wonderful people. How do I get to my, live chat. Let me see. Right. Thank you very much. Nympha. I think that's the word there, isn't it? And I just saw another one as well. Let me just see. And Queen of Cosmic Chaos. Thank you so much, you beautiful people. How are you all in the chat, people? Colin and Fun Times and Jacqueline and SMG and Jenny and Amy and Fred and Lueg and Marlena and London Lady and Sally Ann. You name it. Randy Mells, Captain Flink. Oh, you name it. You're all here. It's wonderful to have you. And my friend Charlotte, my former producer at TNT, she just launched her own YouTube channel. And I will put a link in the description at the end of the show. How are you all? DJ Marcuson, Phil, how are you peeps? Borda, beautiful people, says Louise. Indeed. How are you? How are you doing? I hope you are well. So I wanted to show you this. I snapped this image yesterday. It's a simple post box topper. You know, we like them round here. And I feel that it was a million times more respectful of the war dead, and in that I include animals as well as humans, than those ghouls around the Cenotaph yesterday. For those who are not familiar what we do around here, well, not me personally, but in our country, once a year, we have a Remembrance Day ceremony. Remembrance Day is actually tomorrow, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, which signaled the end of World War I. And many of our ancestors died in World War I and II. But I can assure you, absolutely none of the people around the Cenotaph were directly impacted. No, indeed. These are warmongers. They're warmonger ghouls who get to actually celebrate the death of people that they routinely send off to war. Now, of course, the people around the Cenotaph, yes, they are not responsible for what went on in World War I and World War II, but they continue to send soldiers off to pointless wars. That is the reality. And so I felt that this wonderful post-box topper, so much more respectful. Look at that, lest we forget. Yes, Peter, the establishment at the Cenotaph are an insult to the fallen. Absolutely they are. And we remember the fallen around here. And Aurora summed it up beautifully. She said, good morning, everyone. Remembering our fallen ancestors and the animals that sacrificed their lives for our freedom. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Yes, indeed. So no disrespect to the fallen around here, but plenty of disrespect to these ghouls, royal family, politicians, you name it. You name it. These are warmongering ghouls. Shouldn't be at the Cenotaph. It is an insult to our fallen. Absolutely it is. And what good news that it's all catching up with the BBC. We knew, didn't we? Didn't we know? Last night, we heard the announcement that BBC's Director General Tim Davie and BBC's Head of News Deborah Turnus both resigned. And it's because of the BBC's current affairs flagship show, Panorama. Panorama have been at it again. That is propaganda central. Absolutely. On this occasion, the program edited 2 parts of Donald Trump's speech together. So he appeared to encourage the Capitol Hill riots of January 2021. In Trump's speech in Washington, D.C. on the 6th of January 2021, he said, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women." However, in the Panorama edit, he was shown saying, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you. And we fight like hell." The 2 sections of the actual speech were edited together, even though there was actually more than 50 minutes that separated these 2 statements. Today, BBC's chairman, Samir Shah, is expected to give a statement to a parliamentary committee in which he is expected to apologise for the way the speech was edited. And commenting on the resignation last night, Shah said, "It's a sad day for the BBC," and that Davie, in his opinion, had full support of me and the BBC board throughout. Tim Davie is a filthy gatekeeper and has been for a long time. He became the Director General of the BBC in September 2020. Deborah Turnus is Queen Propaganda. She's been the CEO of BBC News since 2022, overseeing BBC News and current affair programmes. She has a responsibility of around 6,000 people, broadcasting to almost 500 million people across the world in more than 40 languages. That's a whole lot of propaganda. Of course, they will get big fat payoffs. We all know this, don't we, kids? Yes, we do indeed. Tim Davie is known as Teflon Tim, by the way. And that's because nothing has seemed to stick to him, no matter what. He has remained in his role despite all manner of controversies, including Hugh Edwards, including BBC and trans ideology. We've seen how Martine Croxall, a BBC News presenter, has been penalised. She's fallen foul of BBC standards because when she had to read out from the queue pregnant people, she raised her eyes and kind of went, "Women," of course. And it's ridiculous gender speak, but she gets in trouble for that. The fact is, and we say it constantly around here, but I did an extensive report into the BBC only 2 Fridays ago. I mean, literally talking about how the BBC is built on propaganda. I don't know why anybody thinks they should expect anything different from the BBC, because it ain't going to happen. The license fee must be abolished. It's absolutely obscene that it exists. And there is so much that they've done. They've done genocide, whitewashing, complicity with government against sick and disabled people. They have fostered a culture where child abuse has been practiced and hidden. They have had secret services vetting of staff for at least 3 decades. And can I just say, if any damn politician says things like, "Well, if they don't improve, then, what about the license fee?" And I'm looking at you, Nigel Farage. I'm looking at you, Ed Davie, and any other politicians who bang on about. None of them are saying abolish the license. It's absolutely outrageous. In fact, what Farage said, this is BBC's last chance. If they don't get this right, there will be vast numbers of people refusing to pay the license fee. Earth to Nigel, there are already vast numbers of people refusing to pay the license fee. And you are failing in your role as a politician, the leader of reform. Reform, what is the point of them? I mean, tell me, what is the point of them? You don't expect any better from a Lib Dem, right? Ed Davie, Lib Dem leader. He's like, talking about the importance and the quality of BBC being a public service broadcaster. The BBC is a government broadcaster. It was formed by government because they were concerned that what was coming from America, which was this commercial free-for-all, would not enable them to gatekeep the news in England. That's why the BBC was formed 103 years ago, I believe it was. So anyway, yes, loads of controversies in Tim Davie's time, and he deserves to go. They're already cancelling in droves. And Brian said, Nigel is not his own master. Indeed, it would appear not, because quite seriously, if you claim to be some sort of alternative member of parliament, but you're still supporting the license fee, then you are just an establishment. You're just an establishment mouthpiece. Simple stuff. Simple stuff. So good to see them falling. They need to fall further. Down, 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 down. Get this, outdated fee gone, said Axel. I agree with you, Axel. Big morning in the High Court today, by the way, where a string of famous names are involved in hearings against Associated Newspapers. Associated Newspapers is the title that covers the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday. And there are allegations of unlawful news gathering dating from 1993 to 2018. And this includes towards Doreen Lawrence, mum of Stephen Lawrence, Liz Hurley, Sir Elton John and David Furnish, Sir Simon Hughes, formerly of the Lib Dems, Prince Harry, and Frost Law. I don't know who Frost Law is, but the rest I do. And that's all taking place today. Case and Cost Management Conference. Going to be interesting, see the outcome of that, because obviously this is all about alleged phone hacking and, as they say, unlawful news gathering. And I'm not a great fan of any member of royalty, but I do like the way that Prince Harry has gone after these newspapers. And I don't care, for whatever reason that he's done it. He was right to. Unlawful news gathering tarnishes us all in terms of journalism. And we don't like it. We don't want it. What's going on tomorrow, November the 11th? Court hearing for 64 Palestine Action supporters. Going to be interesting. How are they getting them all in there? And on Wednesday, plea hearing for men charged with murdering Ian Watkins. Ian Watkins, of course, being the paedophile from Lost Prophets who was recently murdered in prison. And what's coming up this week? COP30. Lordy. Can we put up with this? From November the 11th to the 20th, world leaders and delegates will congregate in Brazil on the edge of the Amazon, or in the heart of the Amazon, some people say. And it's held annually. It's the United Nations COP summits. And it's what it does is it brings together world governments, scientists, activists, lobbyists, journalists, etc., etc. It's all around the 2015 Paris Agreement, which was this legally binding international treaty on climate change, and which came about during COP21, held in Paris, France. And but COP is where they consensually agree on furthering the climate hoax. That is the reality. That's what takes place. This year, they have 6 major themes to discuss: energy, industry and transport, forests, oceans and biodiversity, agriculture and food systems, cities, infrastructure and water, human and social development, and cross-cutting issues. They will be discussing Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. I hope they'll also be talking about the floods in Spain. I wonder if they'll be talking about the impact of smart cities on the climate. I suspect not. I suspect not indeed. And let me just see if any of my guests are here yet, so I will know exactly where I'm up to today. Yes, I will be with her very, very shortly. And heading at speed for royal assent is a bill I warned about at the start of the year. And I'm not the only one. Claire Wills Harrison, who was with us last week, was also all over it. This is essentially a Snooper's charter. It's the Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill. And the long title is a bill to make provision about the prevention of fraud against public authorities and the making of erroneous payments by public authorities, about the recovery of money paid by public authorities as a result of fraud or error, and for connected purposes. What does connected purposes mean exactly? Well, so the problem is what we're dealing with here is a flagrant infringement of civil liberties. And it is a Snooper's charter. It's kind of like, become known as a Big Brother's bill. They will be able to snoop in your bank account. They can already do that now, but they have to ask for special permission. This is slightly different. This gives them the power in ways that we haven't experienced before. The potential for overreach and abuse is, as you can imagine, absolutely ginormous. There will be a disproportionate disproportionate impact on vulnerable claimants. Recovering overpayments, especially those caused by official error, can place vulnerable individuals in a precarious financial situation. We've seen what's going on in America to do with EBT and SNAP benefits. And the problem is, generally, the people running the show have very little understanding about what it means to exist in poverty. And I don't think actually anybody who hasn't some knowledge about what is genuinely going on out there for people who are in receipt of some benefits should be making any decisions whatsoever. But there is much to fear about this. And unfortunately, not a great pushback from any politician. It's sort of a failure always round, really. But it's one of a number that will enable really a complete overreach of power into our personal business. And we all should be very concerned about it. And it was back in Parliament last week. It will be back in again. They're now looking at the Lords Amendments. And after that, it will get royal assent. And royal assent is pretty much a given, even though we talked about this recently in our royal report. The reality is there is actually a way that kings and queens can refuse to give royal assent, but it's highly inadvisable if they want to live another day, right? It is constitutionally they can stop any of these things, but they never do, which was always, I mean, I had a million issues with Queenie, but one of them was how she was so happy to give royal assent to the very serious attack on sick and disabled people. And trust me when I say this will be absolutely no different. And thank you, Swiss Miss. You are a star. Yes, indeed, you are. I want to welcome in my first guest now. And I'm also, there's so much to talk about today. I'm going to be talking about fake Madeleine and Prince Andrew. Oh, he's not Prince Andrew anymore, is he? Oh, naughty me. Right. Let us bring in my first guest. Here she is. Evelyn McColgan, how are you? Good morning.
Yes. Good morning, Sonia. I'm very well, thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us. You are, of course, from the Partisan Defence Committee. What is the Partisan Defence Committee?
The Partisan Defence Committee, we're associated with a socialist group called the Spartacist League, and we take up the defence of people who are arrested, for example, Palestinian protesters that you just mentioned, and workers' rights, issues of workers' rights, issues of justice. We stand for justice, and we're a campaigning organization. And of course, we take up the case of Lucy Letby, wrongful convictions.
Yes, indeed, you have. And today marks the 5th year since Letby's final arrest, which led to her imprisonment. On Friday, you and a wonderful gang of people, a good turnout, were outside the Criminal Cases Review Commission in Birmingham. Tell us about it. This is a series of protests, isn't it? Because the first time, I don't know if it was the first time, but you were certainly in Liverpool in March when I did a live stream from there. How did it go on Friday?
Yes, it went very well on Friday. In fact, I think it was quite a good turnout. We were outside the offices of the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is where Lucy Letby's case is currently held up. It was indeed the second time. You're right, Sonia. The first time that we came together and publicly protested was in March in Liverpool, at the opening of the final session of the Thirlwall inquiry. And so it's a very similar group of people who came together on Friday. It's an interesting group of people because, as I mentioned, we're revolutionary socialists, but we bring together people simply on the basis that they agree that Lucy Letby must be freed. So we have some conservatives. We're from all points of the political spectrum. And those people are very, very dedicated and committed to this case and to reversing this injustice. So we arrived at the Criminal Cases Review Commission. I went inside and told them at reception that we were there to protest. And they said, yes, we've been expecting you.
Did they really?
Yes.
Oh, how interesting, because in September, Lucy's new barrister, he's not so new now, but new enough, Mark MacDonald, certainly wasn't there for the trial. He submitted, over 1,000 pages of evidence to the CCRC. Yes. Have we seen any movement yet, given that they were expecting you?
No. It is a short answer. In fact, one of the protesters made this point on Friday in Birmingham that the CCRC has now had all of that evidence that was presented to them by Mark MacDonald for over 7 months, I believe, that they have had that evidence for longer than it took Dr. Shu Lee and the panel of medical experts to compile the evidence. You know, it's been sitting with the CCRC for longer.
Terrible.
Yes.
We're big critics, sadly. I wish I wasn't. I don't want to be a critic of it, but we're big critics of the CCRC because it is an absolute failure, has been for a long time. Even change of personnel at the top is still problematic. And for those who aren't familiar, of course, we are talking about Nurse Lucy Letby, who was convicted of the murder of 7 babies and a further conviction of attempted murder of 7 babies as well. And I've not seen anything like this. I've been a journalist for an awful long time, probably longer than I'd care to admit half the time, but I've not seen anything like this. The sheer volume of people who are prepared to stand up and be counted on this. And we are talking about people who have a reputation to lose. I've not seen anything like it, whether that's Nadine Dorries or David Davis, MPs, doctors. Very interesting panel of 26 medical experts have come together about this. This is, I think, unprecedented.
Yes, I absolutely think so. And in fact, I think because there were so many things wrong with the trial, that I think this is the reason that so many medical professionals have approached Lucy Letby's defense team and said, we think there's something wrong here. At the protest on Friday, we did have a number of healthcare professionals who spoke at the rally. And in each and every case, they were suspicious from early on that something was wrong, and then went to examine the evidence and concluded that, oh my goodness, this is really a stitch up. And as you know, Sonia, when the panel of experts produced their evidence that Dr. Shu Lee presented to the press conference, it was so blatantly obvious. No babies were murdered. So Lucy Letby is in prison for a crime, not only that she did not commit, but a crime that didn't happen.
That's a phenomenal statement, isn't it?
Yes.
Obviously,
Yes.
the thing is that you know as well as I do, she's been so significantly demonized that it will be very difficult for some people to accept what you're saying, because they'll be like, you and I can't remember that expression, but it's like, you know, oh God, we're just so soft towards crime and punishment. And I'm not at all, because the thing about justice is you want the right people to be convicted, but you don't want the wrong people to be convicted. And you are in no doubt whatsoever that this woman has been framed, right?
Yes, absolutely. The evidence just keeps mounting, it keeps piling up. And it's true what you say. Public opinion was convinced at the time of her frame-up trial that she was a monster, she was a baby killer. And it's difficult to overturn that. Though I do think that the documentaries that have been made by, for example, Anouk Curry, there have been some very good documentaries, ITV, Channel 4, BBC, that has begun to kind of turn the tide of public opinion away from the fact that this is, you know, she's the worst serial killer that we've ever seen in Britain. So I think that's very important. But it is still true. A number of people will come to us when we're campaigning for Lucy Letby, distributing leaflets saying "Free Lucy Letby," and they will be very angry and violent, you know.
Because it's very emotive. How much more emotive can you get than the idea of a nurse killing such vulnerable babies? They're already vulnerable. They're born prematurely. But there were real issues around this hospital, weren't there? Can you tell us what you consider some of the most obvious issues that people should be aware of about why there are discrepancies for this?
Yes, absolutely. At the Countess of Chester Hospital, there has been, you know, a lot of stuff written about the conditions there. Very overcrowded. This is a neonatal unit where, by definition, you have very sick babies, very vulnerable babies, and the conditions were so bad. One of the most revealing things is that sewage was coming back up through the drains. They didn't have enough incubators, of all things. And one of the issues that this case brings out is that healthcare professionals who see that something is terribly wrong in the National Health Service, because as we know, it's being run down and underfunded, they're afraid to speak out and say what the conditions are. So while Lucy Letby languishes in prison, the conditions at the Countess of Chester and everywhere else that nurses are afraid to speak up are continuing to get worse. Babies continue to die. We had someone present at the Friday demonstration, and also she came to the Liverpool demonstration, who had her baby in the Countess of Chester, who had a difficult birth there, and who said that as soon as she heard that Lucy Letby had been arrested, she was very concerned that something was wrong, because she knew a bit about the actual situation in the Countess of Chester. They didn't have enough neonatal specialists. And Lucy, as you may know, sometime earlier, before her arrest, had taken a grievance procedure against the consultants there. She was a member of the Royal College of Nursing, and so she went through a grievance procedure because they were accusing her. I think they were calling her Nurse Death, and they were really stigmatizing her on the unit. And she won her case.
That's right.
The consultants were asked to apologize to her, and I don't know, are you familiar with an organization, 19 Nurses? They came together after Lucy Letby's conviction, sent a letter to the Prime Minister.
Right.
And so a representative of theirs, who of course has to remain anonymous because of the culture of fear,
Terrible,
of reprisals, what it is in the National Health Service. People are afraid to speak out. So the representative of 19 Nurses said two things. One is that it is dangerous to patient health if nurses are afraid to speak out about the conditions. And secondly, it's unprecedented for a nurse to win a grievance procedure against a consultant. It's unheard of for what happened in Lucy Letby's case to win a grievance procedure against 6 or 7 consultants.
And these 6 or 7 consultants, some of them at least were behind the idea that she was responsible for the deaths of these babies. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And one of them, in fact, there's been an email leaked that contradicts the evidence that one of them gave to the, under oath in court.
Is that Dr. J. Ram? Was it contradicting him? Have I got that correct?
Yes, I don't know if we're allowed to say that, Sonia, but yes.
It was a public email, right? Is it a public?
The email has been made public, and all of the evidence is public. So yes, right. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Yes. Fair enough. But there's been lots of queries about this, what they call the Gang of Four, I think, and obviously we're making no statements about them. We're making no allegations about any of these people. But it is interesting. Obviously, if you win a grievance committee and then people involved in that are also involved in you then being convicted of the murder of babies. And I'm not necessarily saying they are linked. I'm just saying that those facts exist. Yes. So that is the reality. So obviously, new barrister, hope for good things. But the CCRC is not only notoriously incompetent, but notoriously slow. And every minute when an innocent person is inside is an injustice in its own right, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is one of the points that we made on Friday outside of the CCRC. All the other cases of injustices, such as the post office scandal,
yes,
or the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4,
exactly.
One of the lessons is it's not enough to have the evidence that something was wrong, that someone was stitched up. You also have to, it's a battle to get these institutions to admit that they were wrong, because the establishment protects its own institutions and the integrity of, for example, its own injustice system, even in the face of the evidence that something is wrong here. Because as we know, there's a mountain of evidence that Lucy Letby was stitched up. So that's why we think campaigning is important. It's important. What we do is to show that there is public support for Lucy Letby. And at the CCRC, we wanted to say to the CCRC, the public demands that you act quickly on the evidence that is before you and don't sit on it for years and years and years, which is their track record, honestly.
Absolutely. There are people in our comments saying they didn't know that. They didn't know about a grievance process, because obviously these things aren't necessarily what's pushed front and center. Let me read you some of the comments. Boaty McBoatface, great name there, said, having worked in healthcare, there is a culture of fear. Whistleblowers definitely pay the price. And it's the old story. It's not just in healthcare. We see whistleblowers wherever, in the judiciary and the police, wherever, who always pay the price. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. We don't protect whistleblowers better. Grin says, free Lucy. And multiple system failures as well. I think that is the reality, really. But before you leave us today, I want to tackle the one thing that people always say to me, the same thing. I think you might know what I'm going to talk about, and that is the so-called confessional letters. It's the same. People always say to me, yes, but she confessed to it. Yes. She didn't, did she?
She did not confess to it. She did not confess to it. Her close friend, Dawn, has said that as part of their training for how to deal with stress, one of the things they're told to do is to write down the thoughts that are running through your head, your thoughts and fears and so on. And I think the fact that this is such a question, it's so high profile, it shows you the kind of things that were emphasized in order to convict her. Trivial, silly things like that. In the absence of evidence, they had to go for Post-it notes that she had stuck on her mirror for whatever reason, and hyped that in the press and in the court case as supposed evidence that she was the guilty person, that murders had been committed. And the whole frame up, what does it do? It takes attention away from the real problem, which is, what are the conditions like in the Countess of Chester and countless other baby units where babies are still dying because of the lack of funding in the National Health Service.
And so I think I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. I think it's always important that we address the issue of the parents, because some people have said to me before, you don't care about the parents, obviously, because you're out here cheerleading for Lucy Letby. But what about the parents? No, actually, I care very much about the parents, which is why they deserve to know the full truth. And I believe that Lucy Letby is a scapegoat of a failing NHS system. That's my particular take on it. So what do you have to say to the parents?
I couldn't agree more with what you've just said, Sonia. It's an unthinkable tragedy to lose your baby, but to be told that your baby was murdered is just unthinkable, again. And then if it turns out that that's not the case, and it's not the case here with Lucy Letby, you deserve to know the truth, because those parents have had, pain after pain, agony upon agony piled upon them. I agree with you. They deserve to know the truth, what really happened.
And we get, I think, in the Thirlwell inquiry returns with obviously the outcome. I think it's January. It's certainly in the new year, isn't it? I was very disappointed, I have to say, that Lady Thirlwell chose not to take account of very serious issues that were being raised during the Thirlwell inquiry. What do you suspect is going to be the outcome of it?
It's difficult to say. I noticed that the date keeps getting pushed back. Maybe they will wait until after the CCRC has said something. That's pure speculation. I really don't know. But It was very clear when they convened in September for their closing statements. And so much evidence of her innocence had been presented to the public, was in the public domain by then. They seem to just double down on the original conviction. So we will see, but there's not much evidence that they will have a change of heart. I saw it at the time as another example of these institutions protecting the establishment. And I think that it just, campaigners for Lucy's freedom have to just redouble their efforts and keep going until.
Exactly. And you are making a difference. And the reason I say that is because when I first started discussing this, the comments in my live chat were just like a trash can. It was horrendous to read. But today, it's incredible how much work clearly has been done, because I mean, there's a lot in her favor, far more than I think I've ever seen. I'm going to read you this from Melon Star. I knew she was innocent as soon as the drainage guy gave evidence about the sewage leaking. It's true and happens where I live. Plus, the maternity care has gone seriously downhill. It's a cover-up. And that, I think, echoes pretty much what's being said in our live chat today, which is such a huge sea change. It's incredible. So clearly, you're campaigning, you're protesting, the submissions, it's all making a difference. Final word to you, Evelyn.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Sonia. And keep up the coverage of Lucy Letby's case, and the same to everyone else. Free Lucy Letby. I'll leave you with what we chanted outside the CCRC on Friday. We said, hello, hello, CCRC. Lucy Letby must be free.
Wonderful. Absolutely love it. Lovely to see you today. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. Evelyn McColgan, everybody from the Partisan Defence League. Not League. That's not right. Is it? Committee.
Committee. Yes.
Slightly different. Lovely to see you. Have a good week. Excellent work.
Much, Sonia. Thank you.
Take good care of yourself. Yes. Now, you see, if I was suffering a miscarriage of justice, I'd want people like that on my side. Yes, indeed, I would. How are you all? How are you all? Warren Thornton is supposed to be joining us. I can't see him because he is going through all manner. He's in the Philippines. They've got typhoons. So I'm going to carry on with our news, and hopefully he will arrive. Hopefully he will arrive. Right, where are we? So on Friday, what a day that was. So we had the trial at Leicester Crown Court of Julia Wandelt and Karen Spragg. Let me see if I can just find an image of the pair. It's over now. It's all over and done with now. And Julia was found guilty of harassment, but not stalking. And Karen was not found guilty of anything. Oops, that's not where we want it, is it? No. There we go. Karen was not found guilty of anything, but both have been given restraining orders. Now, as long as I get the paperwork I need, Friday's show will be a full show about this, be looking into what this all really means, what was going on behind the scenes, and why the authorities censored me during the trial. Oh, yes, indeed, they did. And so Julia Wandelt obviously has been claiming that she is Madeleine McCann for a very long time. We've known, I said right from the beginning, no, she isn't. Kate and Jerry McCann knew immediately she wasn't. The police knew immediately she wasn't. And they knew immediately she wasn't for different reasons than me. Actually, probably for the same reason being that none of us believe that Madeleine is still alive. That's really the reality. And but the judge imposed a restraining order on both women. The judge actually said that Julia posed a significant risk of harassment towards Kate and Jerry McCann in the future. At one stage, there was also charges to do with Madeleine's twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, but I think they were dropped during the case. There's so much to say. I want to save it till Friday when I can really go in deep on this, because I think this is very important, not because Julia Wandelt is important, no, not at all, but because of everything that happened around her and what I think it means in terms of the McCann case. And I'm very deeply disturbed actually about what it means in terms of the McCann case, because you have people like Jim Gamble, former cop, and he was in the running to be chairing the grooming gang inquiry in the UK, and then he's pulled out. But Jim Gamble is somebody that I've long had a problem with. He was involved in this Madeleine McCann case right from the beginning. He went over to Portugal, and Jim Gamble, for a former cop, seems to be deeply incurious, in my opinion, and has always supported the abduction narrative. And he was wheeled out into media to talk about, as horrible conspiracy theories who say horrible things about Kate and Jerry McCann. I don't say horrible things about Kate and Jerry McCann. I just tell the truth. And that is, I believe Kate and Jerry McCann know what happened to their daughter. And I believe that the British public have been led a merry dance, a very pricey, expensive merry dance since 2007. I find that unacceptable, that we have been lied to so much. So none of that makes me happy. But on Friday, so much to say. So I shall save it to then, because I think it's really important that I take proper time to unpack this. Certainly, with the kind of knowledge that I have about this case, this is a case that has interested me right from the beginning. From the first day, I struggled to believe that 6 doctors were going out every night and leaving their toddlers alone. I struggled to believe that, because even if you hadn't considered that they would be kidnapped, there's a million other things that you would think doctors would consider when leaving babies alone. And that is including them potentially choking, potentially waking up from a nightmare, all of these things. So I had real problems with the official narrative, particularly because people I was dealing with, my editors in mainstream media, were very pro-narrative. And partly they were pro-narrative because I was dealing with a lot of people who were like Kate and Jerry McCann, very middle class, who went on holiday and left their children alone. Now, of course, there are people who believe that none of the parents left their children alone, but they had to say they did because they needed an alibi for whatever happened to Madeleine McCann. Anyway, Julia Wandel, she served all her time now. So I think that they are now looking at deporting her back to Poland. And as I say, I'm going to save it until Friday, because there is so much to cover then, when I will. Yes, indeed. I'm taking it that dear Warren might not be joining us because that typhoon may have got him, but all in the right ways, right? Just mess with his telecommunications. And this one, I think, has quite serious implications for social media, which is why I'm commenting on it, which is the case of former footballer Joey Barton. Let me just find some of my notes here about it. That was also in the court on Friday. Very interesting stuff. And there it is. He will be sentenced on December the 8th. He's been warned by the trial judge, Andrew Menery, that all punishment options remain open. And when somebody says that, it means that you could potentially face imprisonment. He was found guilty of sending 6 grossly offensive messages on X, formerly Twitter. He was cleared of 6 similar charges by a jury at Liverpool Crown Court. And the tweets were between early January and mid-March 2024. And we were told that Mr. Barton, a thug, a violent man, a horrible, horrible man, but we were told that he subjected 3 public figures to offences of malicious communications. And this is where it gets very concerning for me, deeply concerning, because there has to be issues of freedom of speech involved. But he was found guilty of 2 counts of sending grossly offensive communications to female football commentators Eni Aluko and Lucy Ward. And he was found not guilty on 3 counts also relating to them. He was found guilty on 4 counts of sending grossly offensive messages to broadcaster Jeremy Vine. Jeremy Vine again. We remember him from the Alex Belfield trial. And he was also found not guilty on 3 counts relating to Jeremy Vine. Barton was granted bail on condition that he did not contact or talk about the 3 complainants. The prosecutor, Peter Wright Casey, said that Barton had previous convictions and that the sentence hearing would be heard with victim impact statements from the complainants. Well, we've heard all this before from Jeremy Vine. And I think that to a degree, when you are a public figure, you have to be prepared to suck up a lot of stuff, because obviously the moment that there are convictions relating to social media, it is problematic because that can then be used in case law against the rest of us. Now, when I looked at those tweets, they were horrible. They were unpleasant, but I didn't think they were criminal. I thought that they were civil, which Jeremy Vine has already sued Joey Barton, given money as a consequence of that. But this is now criminal. So it does seriously concern me. He was found guilty of calling Jeremy Vine a bike nonce. That's civil. How can that be criminal? So that worries me. Just because I don't like Joey Barton, it doesn't mean that I necessarily think they reached the right conclusion. And the problem that worries me deeply, as I say, is it will be used in case law against the rest of us. I think that none of us should be under any illusion whatsoever that the clampdown on social media is very, very real. If you haven't got Elon Musk and the people, the heads, these big tech bros who are running social media, who are fixing the algorithm so that it just kind of represents only them. And interesting also that a lot of this has happened on X. Don't know if anybody saw the Sky News report last week. Sky News, again, absolute pants, but they were right about this finding. And the finding is that X is very much geared to far right commentary. And it is. And also it's very pro-genocide, very pro-Israel. And Elon Musk has fixed X so that it's kind of like very low on insults to do with him, very pro, as I say, very pro-Israel. It's actually people who talk about the genocide taking place in Gaza are censored. These things are a reality. But to go back to Joey Barton and X, I am deeply, deeply concerned. And on Sunday, Barton was comparing his case to soldiers who died for this country. Oh. And honestly, the responses were absolutely dynamite. As I say, Joey Barton is a thug. I wouldn't, as a woman, want to be near him when he's had a few drinks. And some of the comments were very interesting. One of them was, you didn't stand up for what's right. You stood up for being a knob online. Don't dress it up as heroism. The idea that Joey Barton would compare himself to soldiers is absolutely obscene. I couldn't really understand why certain people were supporting Joey Barton, given his history and what he's already been convicted of. I mean, this is a deeply, deeply unpleasant, violent, thuggish individual. And the only thing that he has going for him is the fact that he was a former footballer, high profile footballer, in my opinion. And the other one was, hold on, lad, you called a man a paedophile and 2 women serial killers and are getting done for it. You didn't fight in World War II, you tit. And it goes on. I mean, people are not falling for it, and neither am I. Neither should any of us, because for Joey Barton to compare himself to our war dead is absolutely obscene. Nonetheless, it is really problematic. And whenever I see Jeremy Vine's name in a court hearing, I'm like, okay, it feels very establishment, doesn't it? Always does. And he was a manager too, says Benny. Noted. And Jacqueline, funny. That's a funny comment. I'm not going to repeat it because I don't want Jeremy Vine suing me as well, on top of everything else. Jeremy Vine, I used to work with him. I worked with Jeremy Vine probably for close to a decade. I was a contributor on his show on BBC Two. I was a regular debater. Sometimes I would debate twice a week on his show. I did all manner of things on that show, including being a mum during Parent Week, which actually I thought was very brave of his team, that they brought in somebody who had already asked very serious questions about things like, childhood vaccinations, etc. And I really enjoyed that week. And I also did a live tramp through undergrowth where I was looking for wildlife on his show. I had a lot of fun on there. We actually fell out over the trans issue. Jeremy is very much men can be women. Right. And clearly I'm not coming from that position at all. And we fell out over that. And then he blocked me on Twitter after saying that I was this incredible journalist. But then he blocked me because, funnily enough, I believe in biology. So there you go. I feel that Joey Barton is and the trial of Joey Barton will be used almost certainly to silence the rest of us. And I don't think any of us are surprised. And a decade, Vape King, because I was a legacy media journalist for a very long time, and which is why I know so much about how they work. So when I talk to people who've never worked in legacy media and they tell me this is how media works and everything, I find it vaguely farcical because they have no idea really. And that's why when I see like people toppled at the BBC, for example, I know it's not just about what happened at Panorama. Right. The fact is that the BBC's Royal Charter is up for renewal in 2027 and they cannot afford any more issues under the kind of direction of Tim Davie. That's why he's going. But it will be a golden handshake of that. I'm in no doubt whatsoever. What we see is often not really what's happening at all. Yeah, Vine, absolute jab pusher. I wouldn't trust him at all. If I'd not have already fallen out with him over the gender issue, we would almost certainly have fallen out. Well, we would definitely have fallen out over COVID-19 because he was draconian. I mean, he was like forcing through hideous ideas of lockdown and masking and vaccination. So yeah, horrible man, but you know, an establishment hack. That's who he is, an establishment hack. Right. I think I take it that dear Warren has been unable to join us. God love you. God love you. I don't know about anybody else, but the information coming out of the Southport inquiry is unbelievable. It is both heartbreaking and anger inducing in the extreme. So we have these three little babies, Elsie Stankham, BB King, and Alice De Silva Aguirre. And these three babies were murdered by this monster. He is a monster. Sometimes people say you shouldn't really demonize people, but he's a monster. And his name, if you don't already know, is Axel Rudakabana. He's 18. He's serving a minimum 52-year sentence for the murders. And of course, now what we've got is the Southport inquiry. And over the last week, we've heard from his parents. And honestly, I'm so beside myself with anger about how much this family knew about what a problem their son was. They knew he was ordering and receiving weapons. They knew he was in danger of killing someone. In fact, on the day that he got in the cab to go off and kill these babies, they thought he was going back to his old school to kill someone. They did absolutely nothing. This has all been admitted. Now, I understand it's difficult, right? It's difficult to, unless you're in that position, what would you do? And it's very easy for all of us to say, well, I would have reported my child. But I actually think, given the extreme evidence that they had that their son was not only a danger to himself, but to society, their failure to act is really problematic, because the reality is what this monster did last July in Southport, England, was absolutely preventable. It was absolutely avoidable. And the parents of these three girls all are, as you can imagine, deeply distressed. And they feel that the apologies that Axel Rudakabana's family has given at the inquiry is no way sufficient, because the mother and father have come out saying that they are profoundly sorry. They accept that this is a failure, but it's more than that. I think that this is such a gross act of negligence that I think it's criminal, and I think it should be dealt with criminally. Elsie's parents, Jenny and David Stankham, said they believed that the parents, which is Alphonse Rudakabana and Letitia Maziah, should be held to account for what they allowed to happen. They did allow it to happen. They allowed this to happen. And they knew how dangerous he was, as the parents said, yet they stayed silent. They failed not only as parents, but as members of our society. These things are all very real. Again, going back to the issue of, would you snitch on your child? If your child is receiving machetes through the post, which their child was, or by delivery, there's real reason to think that something untoward is going to happen with that weapon. You already know your child is a problem. They already knew their child was a psycho, had some kind of psychotic tendency. They knew all of that. Being desperately sorry is not going to bring those three girls back. They could have prevented it, and they didn't. They should be held to account. And can I just say at this point, I am so sick of people like journalist Peter Hitchens. Peter Hitchens, now Axel Rudakabana was known to smoke cannabis, and Peter Hitchens has a long-term issue with cannabis. So do I. I believe it should be legalized. He doesn't. He's completely opposite to me. And he has such a long-term loathing of cannabis that he has shamefully used it on this occasion. He wrote a column, which is those who shut their minds to the dangers of marijuana must now face the grim truth about the crazy violence in Britain. So we are to believe that the crazy violence in Britain, which is problematic, is as a consequence of marijuana use. It is a tiny, small percentage of people who become psychotic after marijuana use, and to use it and use these children in that way is so reprehensible. It is abhorrent to me, abhorrent. And Fate King says, personally, I think it's better than drinking. Truth Lover says, everyone I know who smokes green is a lazy moron. Sorry, not sorry. Well, even on our own comments, we have a difference of opinion. And I always welcome that because I think that's absolutely vital. But yes, this was absolutely preventable. His parents knew what a monster he was before he even carried out his final monstrous act. And they did nothing. And they did nothing. They should be criminally held to account. That is my take on it. Cosmic says, more like cocaine is the problem. Halo says, beautiful people, smash the like button. Yes. Find out what was behind. Hey, that's interesting. So Rudakabana, he did acting, didn't he? Because then he appeared in a BBC Children in Need kind of commercial, didn't he, as a Doctor Who? So that in itself was quite interesting. Stephen said, all drugs are bad news, really. See, now I don't consider marijuana to be a drug. I'm not talking about the stuff that's been messed around with. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about a natural plant. A natural plant that got me in trouble with the broadcast regulator who upheld a complaint against me when they said that I promoted medicinal cannabis. And I'll do it again. I would do it again. Don't get me started on the demonization of the herb. It is an incredible natural healer if used with respect. Lisa, this is absolutely right. It goes back a very long way. In my film, The Business of Cancer, I talk about the demonization of it. And it does go back a long way. And it was interesting because the original demonization of it happened around the 1930s. And that was at the time when Big Pharma was making big strides. So obviously they didn't want anything that was alternative. Not when they can make a lot of moolah from big pharmaceutical products. It's a medicine. It is. If used accurately, absolutely. Skunk is a whole big different story. It's a whole big different story. All I know is I smell weed everywhere, said Lynn. Okay, Lynn, right. Interesting. And smoked it for 25 years. I run 2 businesses, says Sue. Very interesting. You know what? I should do I should do a program, shouldn't I, about this? I really should. Anyway, I think it's absolutely shameless that a journalist is using the preventable, we're going to say that from now on, the preventable deaths, the preventable murder of 3 girls to further his own agenda. There you go. Right. I believe that my next guest is here. He is. So let's not waste any more time and let's discuss his fabulous work. Here he is, Massimo Mazzucco. Good morning to you. How are you, Massimo?
Good morning to you, Sonia, and good morning to everyone listening. Fine, thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us. You are, of course, a photographer. You're a filmmaker. You made an incredible movie. Documentary rather about the fake moon landing. And when I went through the comments, because I thought this is actually so well put together, and I will put a link in the description at the end of the show, but I went through the comments and people were literally saying this is the best moon landing documentary that they've seen. Most comprehensive, the best one, forensic examination, on and on. And we are, of course, talking about the Apollo 11, the landing on the moon that we were told took place on July the 20th, 1969. I remember it now. I was 5 years old, and I remember the whole thing of Neil Armstrong stepping onto the surface, and that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The only problem is many of us now realize all of that was bunkum. And Massimo is here to talk through his incredible work. When I was going through your questions that you ask in tandem with the documentary yesterday, I said to you, I need to put you on at a later spot so we can have a little bit longer time with you, because it's so good, the detail that you go into. So, but first of all, tell me, why did this subject attract you?
Let me just take away 1 minute from you. I also made a documentary about marijuana, which is called The True History of Marijuana, which does confirm exactly what you've been saying all along. And especially it analyzes what happened in the 1930s when Big Pharma, the big pharmaceutical petrochemical complex, in fact, came into power, and they needed to kill the marijuana because otherwise they would have had absolutely no market for them. Anyway, that's a discussion for another time.
Maybe you can get involved in that show, because clearly from the responses in the comments, people are very interested in that discussion. It is a discussion that needs to be had. So thank you. I felt that there was more than just this that we would have in common. So yes, tell me, what interested you about, because some people are already saying, yeah, a movie was beamed at me in 1969. That was a movie, wasn't it?
You said you were 5 years old, right? When that happened. I was 15. I was actually on my birthday. I was born on July 20, 1954, 15 years before. Not only that, but on the very evening of the quote unquote moon landing, I was on a beach, and I was watching the television sets, the black and white television sets at the local bar. All the crowd was around. And for the first time in my life, that night, I kissed a girl. So to me, that event was unique. I felt that the universe gave me that present of the moon landing for my 15th birthday, plus my first kiss. You know, that's how I saw the world then. And I grew up thinking, of course, that the moon landing had been the best thing that humankind has ever achieved until now. Then, unfortunately, I became a photographer, a fashion photographer. I started out by chance with a very famous photographer, one of the, I would say, the top 10 in the history of fashion photography. His name was Oliviero Toscani. He just passed away a few months ago. He was the one who made the famous campaign Colors of Benetton all around the world.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yes. Right.
I started working for him. I worked for 3 years as an assistant. I learned the trade, and then I went off on my own and had my career. And when in the 2000 or 2001, when NASA published all their pictures of all the missions, all of them, 6,000 shots on the website, on their website, I started looking at them, and I started seeing how the same problems and the same defects that I would experience when I, as a photographer, tried to replicate the sunlight in the studio were also there in their pictures. Actually, you have a picture down there. I guess everybody can see it because it's on the screen, right? Right above "Wake Up," everybody sees that.
Yep.
Okay. If you when you have to fake a situation, a sunlight in the studio, say you want to go to the Bahamas and shoot bathing suits, but you don't have the money to go to the Bahamas, and the magazine will say, "Can we do it in the studio?" And you say, "Of course we can." What you do is you take a very large sandbox. You erect a transparent screen behind the sandbox onto which you project the slide of the sea. And then you take the girl and the model, you put her in the middle of the sandbox, and you shine a strong spotlight on her. And basically 95%, you would get a 95% picture similar to what you would get at the Bahamas. That 5% only for professionals can tell the difference. People are fooled very easily.
Oh, yeah.
One of the main problems with that sandbox is that the sandbox has a continued horizontal line going all across the picture, because your sand ends at some point, and the screen behind has to start with a picture of the sea. You cannot have a continuity from the sand to the water. You can never have that water actually leak the sand. If you look at that picture, which is just a coincidence, you can see a very straight line going all across the lower third of the picture, where you have the foreground. The sand is much grayer, very moved. That is the actual sand in the studio. What you see behind that line, horizontal line, is actually a front projection or a rear projection, you can have both, of a picture of a mountain somewhere. When I started seeing that, and then I started looking at more and more and more pictures, and since they published them all, I figured out that 99% of the pictures had the same problem. including a 360 panoramic where this continuous line goes all around, which means that either the astronauts were landed on a cone and the mountains were in the distance, or we're in a studio. So what I did when I saw those pictures, I called my old, mentor, the photographer Toscani. I was still in good terms with him. And I asked him, Oliviero, what did you think when you first saw the Apollo pictures of the moon? And he said, and I quote him, he said, had they given it to me, I would have done a much better job. Okay.
That's a damning statement, isn't it? Damning.
Absolutely. So that tells me that absolutely, that was in my conspiracy mind, which I do have. But in that particular case, no, it was the professional who saw a problem that I myself encountered, and I saw it replicated in the pictures. Then, of course, after that, light lit up in my brain. Then I started looking, and of course, you find more and more problems, shadows that are not correct, and all kinds of things that photographers know exactly where to look to find.
Let's start to work through this, because I think it's so fascinating, and I cannot recommend your documentary highly enough. It answered all my questions. So obviously, this is an image here of JFK, and the starting point is the moon race, isn't it, between Russia and the USA? So start us there, really. What was going on there?
Well, what I believe, this is my conviction. I'm convinced that what I believe is that this is 1961 when Kennedy announced we will land a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth by the end of the decade. That famous announcement, he actually meant it, and people at NASA did mean it. The director of NASA, James Webb, had actually convinced Kennedy that they could do it. Yes, Mr. President, if you give me a decade, we can do it. That's him, James Webb. And so I believe that they were sincere, and they tried hardly enough. The program was very, very, very tight schedule, of course, and they tried hard enough until 1966. That's 3 years before the landing. At that point, they had a major accident on the launch pad of Apollo 1. 3 astronauts died, burned alive inside the capsule. They realized the capsule needed to be the capsule, the part that takes the 3 astronauts to the moon, needed to be redesigned completely. That would mean another extra year of work and a lot of problems. I think, is my conviction, that at that specific point, they said, you know what, guys, we have simulators now that can simulate every single step of the trip to the moon and back in a studio. Why don't we just use that? Because we can't really face the world and say, oops, sorry, we stress ourselves too much. We cannot actually do this. This is too difficult. And so they went for the studio version, which, again, in my own film, you can see all the simulators they had, including the landing. There's a simulation of when the astronauts try to land their LEM, the lunar module, onto the moon. And you look at the pictures on the screen, and then you look at the pictures of the allegedly real landing, they're practically identical. That means either in a studio they had they had such a good fantasy that they could project exactly how the landing would be, or they used the same images from the simulator, and they gave us those pictures as real for the real time. There are many. Photography is not the only problem. After I started,
we're going to start working through them, because obviously your documentary, American Moon, what it does is it poses 42 questions for the disbelievers, and the first one is absolutely spot on, because that's the thing most common that I hear a lot of the time, which we'll get to that shortly. So are you saying that this was falsified simply because, well, one, the Americans didn't want to lose face, but there was also, wasn't there, the competing issues between America and the USSR and wanting to be seen as a superpower as well? That was certainly an issue. So, but there is no doubt from your perspective that was falsified because they were simply unable to do it, and they wanted to be seen to beat Russia. Is that accurate?
It is, except let me be very honest. I cannot state 100% sure that men never went to the moon. As far as I know, they can even be going back and forth now in 5 minutes with other mediums, though.
Right, that's different, isn't it? That's a whole lot different, because this happened in our lifetime. We're still force-fed it, and most people can't even get like a clear line from one room to the next, right? They cannot fathom how in 1969 that was achievable with that kind of machinery. And machinery looks like it's held together with sticky back plastic, right? And cereal boxes. It looks pathetic, doesn't it? It does, doesn't it? Let's start working through that. The first thing that I hear is about the Van Allen belt. People talk about that a lot. Talk to us, Massimo.
Well, that seems to be, again, is something that cannot be proven absolutely, that you cannot go through them because of the radiation. Van Allen belts are 2 radiation belts that start from the North Pole and surround the Earth and in the South Pole. And this is like a big donut that actually protects us from cosmic radiation because it captures most of them. But of course, it's like hell in there, because imagine you capture all the lions that come from the forest to your house, and they're all in a cage, and you actually want to go across that cage. It's not very healthy to begin with. Okay, so again, this is one point that cannot be proven, because nobody can actually go out and say, oh, look, I died, that you can't do it. But again, common sense says that it's impossible. And the problems that they're having today in quote unquote returning to the moon, it actually tells me that problem has not been solved yet. The radiation, when Van Allen, they're called Van Allen because a scientist named Van Allen discovered them in 58 or 57. He stated first, it's absolutely impossible for human to even think to go through them unless you go through the poles, because there's no radiation there. But you can't go through the poles because the moon is on the ellipse, on the equatorial orbit. So you cannot just go out and then make a turn to the right like you would do with a car. Once you shoot out, that's your direction. So he said, it's absolutely impossible unless we can find a system for them. Obviously, once they went to the moon in 69, Van Allen was forced to walk back what he said. But what he said originally is what matters, of course. It's like Galileo. Galileo initially said, look, this thing is moving. Then they forced him to say, no, it's not. But of course, we know that the first answer is the good one. That remains a problem, I believe still today. It's a big problem, because radiations, not only do you have the problem of crossing the Van Allen belts, but then you're out exposed to the cosmic radiation.
Right.
And again, let me loop back to the photography, because in this case, it's very important. If there is one argument that's impossible to destroy about not having gone to the moon, is that all the 6,000 pictures that were taken out on the moon, allegedly, do not carry a single sign of radiation on the film. I, as a photographer and as an assistant, I learned my lesson the hard way, and I know what happens when you, by mistake, put film through the X-ray machine of an airport. I made that mistake once, and I will never forget what happened. Practically all the pictures were destroyed. And that was 1 second of X-ray.
That's an excellent point, actually. That is an excellent,
and the astronauts are out on the surface of the moon, even for 8 consecutive hours. The camera has no protection whatsoever, because it's impossible to protect from radiation. And the film is in there, and the film is perfectly clean. There's not one single damage from radiation. And this is absolutely impossible to people who maintain that we went to the moon. The debunkers, they have tried to explain that, but there's absolutely no way you can explain that logically. The very fact that the film has no radiation damage on it tells me with absolute certainty that film has never been outside the Van Allen belts.
Interesting. And also what's interesting, of course, is given what they already would have known about the Van Allen belt, NASA apparently sent these astronauts fairly unequipped for the expedition, weren't they? They were not really protected.
I'm telling you, we knew about the problem because Van Allen said it's a problem, okay? Once you send out these astronauts, you would at least expect them. The first mission officially went out is Apollo 8. That circumnavigated the moon and came back a year before Apollo 11. Once you get out there, you would expect at least the astronauts, when they reach close to them, to kind of talk about it, to say, are you guys feeling anything funny? I don't see anything in my eyes yet. How about you? There is not one trace of one conversation, either between the astronauts or between the astronauts and Earth, about crossing the Van Allen belt the first time in history. I mean, it's like Columbus going over the other side of the world, and he's communicating,
Right.
and he says, "Oh, the birds are beautiful here. By the way, you went across the world. Do you have anything to say about it?" No, obviously not, because in my opinion, and in most researchers' opinion, they never went out of the Van Allen belts. They stayed in orbit for 7 days. They grew their beard nicely, and then they came back after circulating the Earth for 7 days. That's exactly how they did it, in my opinion.
I think another question that I think is, it's so obvious, and yet I think it's missed a lot of the time, and that is, there was clearly none of the regular movement that you would expect in the picture. So, for example, the movement of sand, the movement of pebbles, and there was a distinct lack of that, wasn't there?
It was actually more than that. It's being that we are on the moon, and supposedly there is no atmosphere there. When the rover, the Land Rover, the Jeep that they had, goes very fast and lifts a plume of sand in the back, that sand is supposed to be should be ejected and fall straight forward without making any dust clouds, because there's no air. It does create clouds. The dust from the moon remains suspended in the air, exactly as if we were in a studio. That's another big telltale, another big sign that we are in the presence of atmosphere. We're not in the vacuum. In the vacuum, the sand would be ejected from the wheel that's rotating, would be ejected in a straight line and fall like a bullet, basically, with an arch. Instead, if you look carefully at the famous, they call it the Grand Prix, when they drive around the lunar rover, and then they pretend to make a counter steering, then they play like they're on the sand, and they shoot up the sand, and you see these little clouds that they should not be happening if we were really on the moon.
Exactly. And also the absence of the sound of an engine when they were restarting as well. You can hear music, but not an engine, right? That in itself should be some red flags for people.
The departure engine, it's inside the lunar module. It's not outside. It's not attached outside. It's inside. It's like I'm sitting on a chair here. They're actually sitting on the engine. The microphone is here. This engine is supposedly pushing the whole thing back up to the Earth. There's absolutely no sound whatsoever. And let me tell you something else about sound, missing sound, that's very important to me. Astronauts wear, when they're on the surface of the moon, they wear what is called a PLSS, Portable Life Support System. That machine allows them to survive for 8 full hours out on the lunar surface, and it provides for cooling system, because it's 120 degrees Celsius. I don't know if in England, if you use Celsius or what do you use, but anyway, 100 degrees, very, very hot. Let's put it above boiling temperature of boiling water. Okay, so they have a cooling system inside. We'll have a net of little liquid that goes all over their inside, and of course they have a pump that needs to pump this water and recycle it and refresh you. Also, they have a second pump that's supposed to pump your oxygen for you to breathe. This whole system is connected. Of course, you're connected to the PLSS, and there's at least 2 big pumps going on. And when they talk, there's absolutely no sound. You would expect to hear this kind of noise in the background when they talk to each other. There's absolutely nothing. So either they invented the most silent pumps in the universe, but they never replicated them for us to have, or they're not using them and it's all fake.
And also at that point, you raise another interesting issue, and that is, given, excuse me, the importance of this mission, just the idea that they're playing music as well, kind of, it almost creates as if it's not important at all. It's like, they're just driving down the motorway, really. And even though it's small, it still adds, doesn't it, to the kind of bank of evidence that there's a problem.
Well, when they lift off, I think it's Apollo 15, somebody puts on a music, like a background music, to make it more, it's like Hollywood.
Exactly
I mean, who even have the time to think about, let alone the fact that this can disturb your conversations, because you need to be talking very clearly to your companion. There's no room for extra sounds there. But who even thinks of turning off a music when you're actually starting off a rocket from the moon, and you know you only have one chance to get out of there,
and the whole world is watching you.
and the whole world's watching. And oh, by the way, before we go, Johnny, how about some music?
Right.
Let's go.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's so Hollywood. It's so Hollywood.
It's very
really,
Hollywood, isn't it? Excuse me. And you also, obviously, the issue of like that there's no moisture on the moon, and yet there was sand sticking to them as well. That, again, another clear telltale sign that there's a problem, right?
There's big chunks of sand. We're not talking about a thin veil of dust that could maybe attach to the equipment because of electrostatic mechanism. This is big chunks of mud. Of course, one says, why would they need to wet the mud? Because they need to give the impression that there is no atmosphere. So for them to have no dust when they move, they probably had to wet the sand a little bit. I used to race motocross in my youth. And before every race in summer, because to avoid the clouds of dust, they would go around the track and wet it with a special liquid, which was mixed of water and oil that would make the sand heavier. And so when we race, we wouldn't have all this dust of a cloud of dust. But again, when you wet it and then you actually lift and move that sticks everywhere. And it's really everywhere on the wheels, on the camera lens. You have big chunks of mud attached to the camera lens, and they stick there. How can they stick if there is no atmosphere? That's impossible to explain also.
It's so fascinating. We won't necessarily be able to cover everything, which is more's the pity. We've still got time to carry on, though, because I think the issues that you raise will, I think, prick the conscience of even the most diehard supporters of this narrative. And oh, really? Have you not found that? Because this was 2018 when you released that documentary. Really?
Most people who are in between, yes, they might fall over the side of no, we never went. But there's some diehard debunkers. They would go to any extreme to explain and to answer all of my questions. I mean, if you listen to them, every question has an answer. You don't want to hear those answers because you want to remain in a logical system of thinking. But they do have an answer for everything. I mean, I'm not even going to start to tell you what they are.
I know, absolutely. But there's so many issues. Like there's this light, right? I think it's flashes of light that occurs. What was that all about? And you asked that at question 21.
Right above. Well, the idea is that in order to fake the 1/6 gravity, they used cables like they use in regular movies, and the suspension cables that are attached to the back. And they're black, of course, and they're not supposed to shine any light back, except sometimes they do. Sometimes even a darkened cable will have a little flash of light in a studio. What you see is in a couple of instances, the astronauts are jumping around, and right above their head, a couple of meters above, so way above their antenna, you see this flash of light, which is exactly above their head. That, again, cannot be explained. You know how the debunkers explain that? Oh, it's a bad spot in the film, which actually happens right above their head. It doesn't happen anywhere else on the screen except right above the helmet of the. Yeah, that's a telltale that they're using cables also.
Let me go to the comments, ask you some questions. Sky High says, what about moon waves?
What about them? I'm sorry, but I don't know what he's talking about.
I don't know either. That's literally just what about moon waves, right? Well, we'll return to that if you want to give us a little bit more information on that. Gavaldo says Capricorn 1 movie is basically a true story. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Capricorn 1 was a very courageous movie that was made only 4 years after the moon landings, the 1974. Of course, they don't tell you we never went to the moon. They use an identical setup, and they narrate how they faked a trip to Mars. But of course, the LEM is exactly the same, and the whole story is exactly the same. And the idea that the moon landings were faked was actually injected in the public discourse by that movie.
Yes.
And I love when people say, "Oh, it would be much more expensive to reproduce the moon landings in the studio than going for real." That's one of their reasonings. Actually, that film cost $4 million, so it was extremely cheap to make, and it looks exactly like the pictures of the moon.
Right. Amy asks a good question. Why did the Russians not expose the lie?
This is not only a good question, I would say this is the one most important, the most logical, the most legitimate question that anybody should ask when questioning when wondering about the moon landings. My answer is that it's multifaceted. There's more than one reason. Number one, imagine you're the one who just lost the moon race. Okay, you're not a third party. You are the person who actually lost. And we all, quote unquote, we've all seen it on TV. And what the Russians do come out and say, oh, it was fake. That would look like the sore losers that first of all. But there's a much more important reason behind. There were a lot of economic agreements going on behind closed doors between the Soviet Union and the States at the time.
Right.
And in particular, there was already a joint program that would bring us in 1975 to the Apollo-Soyuz meeting in space. The two capsules, the Soviet one and the American one, joined in space in the Apollo-Soyuz program. That was in 75, but that was already, the plans were already rolling as the Apollo missions were going. For the Russians to call that a bluff, it would have basically meant the end of all cooperations with the Americans, in which they were actually getting a lot of technology from the United States. You had American astronauts visiting the Cosmodrome, the Russian astronauts were visiting the Houston launch place. They were exchanging a lot of scientific information. It was in both interests not to reveal the fakery. And they would have looked like stupid losers anyway. So
I get that. And that hits my solar plexus, as that makes a lot of sense. And MK Leggy says Russia and USA both worked together. There was no moon race. So the idea of a moon race, that was kind of like falsified for
it was the hype. Right. It was the hype that was built, was injected into the American public in order to justify the expense, because the expense was very high. And many people say, why? I mean, we have Vietnam, we have a lot of problems at home. We have 1968, we had Kennedy killed, Robert Kennedy just killed. Right. Why do we spend so much money to go to the moon? We have all the problems here. So to answer that, it was very important to inject the idea of the moon race, and we have to win, and we have to show the world that we are the technologically most advanced and all that. So yes, absolutely. That must have been a good reason.
Yes, indeed. Ange said, Sonia, please ask Massimo how rockets propel themselves in a vacuum. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense, except I cannot answer the question technically. I'm not scientifically prepared to do, but I know that there's a huge discussion, about the propulsion and the fact that in the vacuum, the rocket should not work at all. I cannot answer either way, but I acknowledge that there is a big discussion there. I tend to believe that because of the system of, it's actually a reaction. It's not an action against the vacuum, but it's a reaction. So I still think that it works, but I cannot prove that either way or either way. And it is a big argument. It comes up every time we discuss the moon landings on my website. There's always somebody that says, how do the rockets work in vacuum? I don't have the answer for you, unfortunately. A definite answer.
Well, and thank you for being honest about that. User says, was it Stanley Kubrick's best film? That people have often said that Kubrick was involved, haven't they?
It is one of the arguments that finds me at odds, let's say, with the community of the moon hoax. I don't believe it was necessary to bother someone like Kubrick to do, let me say, such a shitty job. It is a terrible job, photographically speaking. It is not necessary to go and wake up somebody like Kubrick to do that. Any average photographer in a Disney studio, for example, and I'm not saying Disney by chance, because it was a very tight connection between Walt Disney and Werner von Braun. Any average photographer could have done that job the way it was done. Again, when my photographer mentor told me I could have done a much better job, that's exactly what he meant. I believe that Kubrick was aware, of course. He had contacts with high levels at NASA. They have given him a special lens. There's a whole story about the special lens that they've given him and all. Yes, but I don't think that, and he puts a lot of innuendos in the movie The Shining, but it's not to tell them that he did it. It's to tell the world that we didn't go.
I
But
got
not
you.
necessarily that
Got
we did
you.
that.
Got you. Derek in the comments saying, ask about the Van Allen belt. I think you might have joined late, Derek, because we had quite a big, Massimo gave us quite a lot of information about the Van Allen belt right at the start of this conversation. So do go back and check that out. People talk about how they can see the backdrop in the pictures. And what else? The man in the moon filmed the landing and taking off. So that, I mean, that's the other thing, is the complicity of it. Would this have involved a lot of people being complicit in what was taking place?
That is the second most legitimate question that anybody who is wondering about the moon landings may ask. And it's, again, I address both of these questions in depth in my film. I'm just going to be very, very short here. It's not true that so many people would have to be involved. When they say, oh, 400,000 people were involved in the NASA project, how could you have so many people keep the secret for so long and nobody ever speak? The first ones to be fooled are the people who are sitting in the actual launch room, the control room that you see in the films, in the old films, when they actually watch the moon landing and they all get up and wave their little flags and they start their cigars when you actually could smoke inside. They all puff their cigars and everything. Those NASA employees, I believe, are the first ones to be fooled. In other words, all you need to fool these people is a very tight crew, to film the land, to film the moonwalks separately, and then somebody to simply broadcast those images to the very NASA people who would be the first one to cheer because they think that we went to the moon. But all you need to do is pre-record those images and either broadcast them from a satellite in orbit, so the actual signal is coming from the direction of the moon, or some other gimmick that they could figure out. But what you see on that screen in the control room and everybody cheering, those people are the first ones to getting fooled by NASA itself. All it takes is about maybe 30, 40 people in the know to keep this under wraps. And I believe that's not that difficult to do.
And many of them will already be dead by now, won't they? And there's and I deal a lot with corruption anyway, and how people keep secrets within big organizations and government establishments. So there is a comment here which was saying that a lot of the NASA people were duped as well. People are also talking to me in the comments about Elon Musk. Any thoughts about Elon Musk and Mars and space travel? Did you just raise your eyes to heaven there? Because if so, me and you are definitely on the same page.
I think that the man is a joke. I think the man is a joke. It's the richest man on earth, but it's still a joke. When he says we're going to Mars and we're going this. Oh, by the way, he said, because he probably knows about the problems, we might as well skip the moon. There's no need to go back to the moon. Let's go straight to Mars. Like, oh, it's just done. Been there, done it. Been there, done that. So why go back, he said at some point. Of course, there's a big competition between SpaceX and then the other one, which I don't remember the name. Now that the private sector is involved, of course, all kinds of interest. But
absolutely,
the way he does things, it just makes it look so easy. He should explain. He should be the one to explain why we can't even go back to the moon now. Artemis 1 was supposed to go back in 2014 the first time. Then it was pushed back. I mean, still with Obama, I remember we are going back to the moon. Okay, Bush started it in 2004, the new program, Artemis. Then Obama was supposed to go back to the moon. He didn't make it. Then Trump came, and Trump won, in Trump 45, was supposed to go in between 16 and 2020. In 4 years, they kept delaying. Then Biden came and says, I'm going to be the one who we go back to the moon. Another 4 years of delay. Now we're back with Trump again, and again delays. We've only sent out Artemis 1. Artemis 2 has been pushed back to next year, and Artemis 3, which is the actual landing that's planned, has been pushed indefinitely beyond 2027. So somebody, maybe Elon Musk, could explain why in 1968, starting from zero, because we started from scratch in 1961, in 8 years, 1969, we actually managed to go to the moon 6 times. And now, in 25 years, with all the technology that we have today,
wild.
we can go back.
Wild.
I mean, that
It's
in
absolutely
itself should
insane.
raise more than an eyebrow.
It does raise more than an eyebrow, because the kind of world we live in where everything gets monetized, we really should be having day trips now, shouldn't we, to the moon, given, what we've apparently done in 1969. And also, this is interesting what Colin Guthrie says, and that is the demeanor of the astronauts at the following press conference was a giveaway. Did you ever, I can't remember if it was Buzz Aldrin. Do you remember, who was it? Bart Sybil, wasn't it, who handed him a Bible? Did you see that? He wanted him to swear on the Bible, right, that they'd been. Do you know what I'm talking about, Massimo?
Not only did I see that, that's the last chapter of my film. I used Bart Sibrel's images of him chasing all the astronauts of Apollo 11, and all of them refusing to swear that they have been on the moon.
Absolutely.
And Armstrong even refuses $5 in charity, $5,000 in charity. Says, if you swear on the Bible, I have $5,000 here. You can give it to charity to anybody. He says, no, I won't sign. I won't swear. Why? Why not? Because I won't. As simple as that. Obviously, they know one thing very importantly. In the United States, if you swear on the Bible and you're on camera, then you can actually be taken to court for lying by swearing on the Bible. So the fact that he has both the Bible and the camera on,
right,
probably scared them to the point that they just run away. They run away like little rabbits. It's really awful. In my opinion, I have to say, I feel sorry for these 12 people who were forced to lie for all their life. They cannot in any way admit what really happened, and they have to take that secret to the grave, because astronauts are originally very courageous people, very brave people, and I don't want to have to think what I had to go through when they were told, we're not going to make it, but we're going to have to fake it. And that must have been the most awful sensation for any of those guys. So I feel sorry for them in a way. I don't blame them for lying to the world. They simply had to. This one big secret you cannot give away.
Yeah, we don't know what pressures they were dealing with in the background or how they were compromised or any of those things. Although I did notice there's a news story yesterday in the press about Buzz Aldrin now confined to living in a small space, hardly any money, life falling apart, people assuming that he will be dead soon. And I think those things are interesting. But listen, Massimo, you've been a terrific guest, absolutely terrific. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. Before you leave us today, what do you think is like the ultimate red flag that somebody who denies what you are saying should be aware of?
About the moon landing, you mean? As I said, find me a trace of radiation damage on the film, and I will change my mind. There is none. And that is absolutely impossible. I know by personal experience what happens when you expose film to radiation. And I'm talking only X-rays, my experience. Out there, there's X-rays, gamma rays, alpha rays. I mean, that film should have been obliterated. You would have been able to barely see something, if anything at all. And those pictures are perfectly sharp, perfectly neutral in color. The blacks are blacks. I mean, you would love to get something like that in a studio, let alone on the moon.
Indeed. And I want to say a big shout out to Priscilla, who supports Wake Up and suggested Massimo as a guest. Great choice, sister. Fantastic. Massimo, we are going to haul you back to talk about marijuana, and because you are an absolute tonic to listen to. I mean, I think what I've really enjoyed about hearing you talk is that there's no airs or graces about what you're saying. It's just very straightforward, very factual, and what's not to love about that? Everybody, this is Massimo Mazzucco, and he is one to absolutely watch. I will put a link in the description to his documentary. Take good care of yourself, Massimo. Have a lovely week. Wonderful to have you.
Bye-bye. Ciao, Priscilla.
Bye. Wonderful indeed. And it's so lovely talking to somebody who's so well versed in this issue, and I believe he is. Obviously, he's a photographer, and a filmmaker, but highly recommend his documentary. Thank you, Massimo, says Gina. David Nutt. I do like David Nutt. Yes, I'd like to bring him on. People are asking about 3i Atlas. Now that's interesting, isn't it? I was watching a discussion with Avi Loeb, who is he is a professor at Harvard. And so what you have are people like Professor Brian Cox, who is kind of like, he irritates me. I'm not a great fan of Professor Brian Cox. Let me just bring some, oh no, that's the moon landing. Let's take the moon landing off. There we go. We have Avi Loeb, who has actually addressed a great deal of the issues. So 3I Atlas. The idea is that they are uncertain what it is. So you have people like Brian Cox, who is such an establishment voice. Everything that you would expect the establishment to say, Brian Cox always says it, right? But Avi Loeb has come out in opposition to him. So you have Professor Brian Cox saying that this 3I Atlas, which is aiming towards Earth and will be at the closest on the 19th of December, is a completely natural object made of carbon dioxide, water ice, and cosmic dust. And conversely, you have Avi Loeb, who disagrees. He said that the 3I Atlas could actually be an alien probe, piece of technology, not a conventional comet. And what I love about Avi Loeb's approach is very much, it is actually scientific. Whereas what you have with Professor Brian Cox is it's like the science is settled. Let's not discuss this anymore. It's very gatekeeper attitude. He is a professor of astrophysics. And as Avi Loeb has pointed out, Brian Cox has failed to address the 10 anomalies that exist about this. And there is this whole issue that it is aligning in such a way that it is almost part of the trajectory of our planet. And Avi Loeb said it is not an overwhelming probability that it's a comet, that we have to allow for the fact that it could be technological, that it could be an alien craft. But the problem is, when you have people like Brian Cox as this establishment gatekeeper, it tends to take over all of media. So I saw this one debate between Avi Loeb and Tom Swarbrick on LBC. And Tom Swarbrick, who I've talked to before, I've been on his show before. Tom's okay. He generally gives people a good say, but he was very much coming from the Brian Cox perspective. He kept interrupting Avi Loeb because it scares people. This whole idea that there is life out there scares people. So they want to stick to the idea that this is absolutely similar to anything that we've experienced before. The 3I Atlas was first kind of like seen, first spotted on the 1st of July this year. And it was spotted from Chile. They were using an Atlas survey telescope. And it seemed clear to the people who had spotted it that this was no ordinary space rock. This was no ordinary comet. And there are a number of factors that make it no ordinary comet. And one of them is there is this non-gravitational acceleration, which is moving faster than gravity alone would allow. So that already lends to the suggestion that there's something much bigger, much deeper out there. And ordinary comets are nudged slightly by the gases that are released from kind of like their icy surfaces. But the motion of 3I Atlas is unusually strong. It is different. It's showing a difference. And that's why science should never be settled. It should always be open to debate. There's been a lot of speculation. It's become a very populist topic now. And obviously you have people like Elon Musk discussing it. But you also have people like Kim Kardashian, she who just failed a bar exam. But the fact is there is unusual behavior that has been exhibited from it. And that does tend to suggest that this is more than a natural comet. Now, clearly, I don't claim to be anybody with any great particular knowledge of comets, but I am turning to people who have. Now, already for me, when I take the words of these characters, I look at what they stood for before. And as I say, with Brian Cox, everything that is an establishment narrative, he's behind it. Vape King says all hogwash. And it may well be. It may well be. But we should still be questioning it rather than just immediately assume that it has to be a regular comet, because it doesn't even exhibit all the traits of a regular comet. So we should be questioning what, in fact, it is. And I'm open to questioning. Why shouldn't we? I don't get it. Shug said the only gases being released is the hot air they produce when lying to us. And Michelle says, of course, their predictions about comets are wrong. Their astrophysics are wrong to start with. And And Ray J said, difference from what? There are only two things to compare it so far. So mostly speculation. Indeed. But surely a voice that is saying, let us look, let us question, is not just speculation, is it? That is investigation. And I think it's incredibly arrogant, this whole idea that we are somehow alone and that there isn't more intelligent life out there separate from our own. So it does interest me. And as I say, the idea is that it will be closest to Earth on December the 19th, and we shall see. And they also talk about the kind of color shifting that makes it different as well to regular comets. And again, don't claim to be any great knowledge of it. I'm basing this on what R.V. Lopez has to say, and rather less on what Professor Brian Cox has to say. The name, everything says, the name, these are going so fast. The name sounds like a new gadget or Tinternet system, and Atlas is what we use to map a world. Just weird. Indeed. And that's a good point, Ray J, about CIA's biggest recruiting university, Harvard. I don't dispute that at all. But I do like to hear questioning voices on this. Aztec Style said, we've seen 3 interstellar objects in 12 months, and these quacks want the headlines. Got you. And Mattman points out that the science is settled, people. Booster time now. I take your point, Matt. I do indeed. And right, moving on from that, just thought I'd follow that about the moon landing. I think it's very interesting, the whole kind of like evolution of AI, obviously. And we talked about this the other week, and how about one of the kind of founders of it had said that jobs are going to go. But really what they're starting to reveal is there are certain type of jobs that will go. Certainly almost anything that is digital can be replaced by AI. Rather less easy to replace is actually kind of blue collar workers, right? Manual stuff, plumbing, electrics, but any IT job can be replaced. And some jobs can't. A job of a journalist cannot be replaced, which is fantastic. You can have all manner of AI, which will give you summaries, but journalism actually involves human thought, human investigation. So hopefully we will be the last lot to go. But, you know, in terms of jobs, the next millionaires, I think it was Elon Musk who said it, won't have college degrees. And when you think that we've come through decades of people being pushed into college, into university for further education, racking up ginormous bills, you know, 100,000, a student now going through university is coming out the other side with not much change from owing £100,000. And yet they've almost been pushed into it. It's been part of our society that you should have further education. And now we're saying that a lot of the stuff that they're training for and studying will be redundant. So that in itself, I think, is interesting. They're talking about flat Earth in the comments. Okay, we didn't get there, did we? Ficus says, hope my job doesn't go. I am a shop tiler. Shug said, nearly all jobs will be replaced eventually, or bricklaying. Yes. Mattman, is that true? 16,000 millionaires leaving the UK each year. I don't doubt it. Right. Congratulations, Sash from Luton, winner of Paul Cardin's book, Damn Bomb Alley. Sash responded when I notified, said, oh my God, I never win anything. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Wonderful to hear it. I'm very glad you did. That makes me so happy. I think I missed out a news story earlier. What was it? I know what it was. It was about Prince Andrew being called to Congress. Now, the thing is, it's really important to understand that just because Congress, the US Congress, have said that they want to talk to Prince Andrew, they have no power to subpoena him. And so obviously what's happened is 16 or 17 members of the US Congress have sent him a letter saying that there are real issues with the Jeffrey Epstein story. This follows, obviously, the further leaking of emails. This follows Andrew losing his titles. This follows Andrew being forced to leave Royal Lodge. And I don't feel sorry for him, because that man is still going to live better than most people. He will be sorted out. Absolutely, he will. But US Congress want him to go over, and they want to question him about Jeffrey Epstein. They want to question him about notes that they found in Epstein files, such as massage for Andrew and things like that. Now, if Andrew is anything like his brother Charles, when Charles was called to the child abuse inquiry and he sent in a letter so that he couldn't be questioned, I wouldn't be surprised if Andrew did something like that. Am I saying Prince? Am I saying Prince? Sorry, guys. Of course, he's no longer Prince Andrew because he's had to give up all his titles. He is now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And many people question why would he call himself Mountbatten, given that Lord Louis Mountbatten, his uncle, is very much believed to have been a child abuser. And that was why the IRA blew up his boat. Andrew is as guilty as Trump. I see. He is now a nobody. Vade King, he was always a nobody. What about Charles and Savile? Oh God, please! I've done so much about Charles and Savile, but you're absolutely right. I always consider that. I think Andrew is, for all of whatever he's done, right? Whatever he's done, I think it is absolutely highly likely that a number of young females were trafficked to him by Jeffrey Epstein. In Virginia's book, if you remember, she talks about being on Epstein's island, Little St. James, with Epstein and Andrew and 8 girls in a giant orgy. And of course, Virginia Giuffre sadly is no longer here, but her book lives on. Andrew Sachs, Coburg, Gotha, absolutely, which they gave up, of course, when there were real issues with Germany in the war. I don't feel sorry for Andy, one iota, says Gina. Me either. I don't either. Also to note, I've been putting more clips online. Some people often don't realize that when I put clips online, it's often part of a longer video and they ask me for part 2. So always check in the description when I put clips online, because I will also put a link to the longer video. And I generally on Fridays, my investigations are lengthy, deliberately so, right? I do lengthy videos, and I know that's not always everybody's cup of tea. They prefer shorter videos, and that's cool. But I do lengthy videos because that's the contribution I want to leave in the world. I don't just go, I must make it a lengthy video. I just make it as thorough as I humanly can. And it turns out that when you go in depth, they become lengthy videos. But I also do absolutely understand the kind of world that we live in, and that some people want shorter videos. And so I will endeavor to put more clips online. Yes, I will. Absolutely. Everything okay? Says, rest in peace, Virginia. I believed you. I believed her about this. I did. Send Andrew back to Germany. Hey, Sonia, said anything about Zoran Mamdani? No. There's only so much that I can fit into one show, Amy. And I do fit in a lot, right? And talking about the new mayor of New York is just not a priority to me. But it may well be in future weeks, but not today. And also, I think it's fairly outrageous what's happening with the BBC. Again, I will put in the description my report into the BBC from 2 weeks ago. And you have people like Nick Robinson, who gets like 400,000 a year, and he's coming out saying the attacks on the BBC are political. Please get a grip, right? Because as said at the start, the BBC is political. It is the media arm of the British government. Nick Robinson is a problem, always has been. But I guess when you're earning 400K and you're part of an organization, it pays you to defend it, right? Then we have that absolute idiot, Lisa Nandy, who is the culture secretary. And again, she said that prior to Tim Davie having to resign, she said that she had complete confidence in Tim Davie. She's an idiot, another one who doesn't understand biology, that thinks men can be women. But yeah, so the shorter video, the most recent shorter video I did is a clip from the BBC. It is absolutely outrageous that the BBC doctored that Trump clip. Whatever you think about Trump, that is really heinous propaganda. Heinous. What's that? Top people leaving BBC. Are we finally seeing change, says Reba? I doubt it, Reba. I think it's a saving face process, as I say, because they've got their royal charter up for renew in 2027. That's why. Thank you, as ever, to my wonderful, wonderful donators, to Faye J, to Ian J, to Eleanor J. A lot of J's going on there. To Rachel G, to Margaret R, to you lovely people today, to Sabariel, thank you. To Catherine, thank you. I appreciate you both so much. And Jill C left a message saying, keep shining the light upon the darkness to unlock the truth. Trudging this path with fellow truth seekers. We trudge together. Thank you, Sonia. And it's much love and rainbow light. Thank you so much, Jill. And thank you, Queen of Cosmic Chaos, this morning as well. You people are incredible. You absolutely are incredible. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. And just to say, please don't make any comments in the chat. Obviously, I didn't have Friday's show because I was in the High Court on Thursday. I don't know the appeal outcome yet until we get the judgment. But when I can talk, I will. Right. And on to the end of the show. The end of the show actually involves a viewer's email. It really got me thinking. So let's talk about it. The email reads as follows. Dear Sonia, thank you for Wake Up. I have watched every episode and enjoy the variety of guests and subjects you cover. I have a question. Have you ever felt like you didn't count, and no matter what you do, the powers that be are always going to oppress us and lead us into a more governed world? I have always been positive, but in the last 5 years, I have felt less so. They did all they did to us with COVID, and they've got away with it. I wonder if we shouldn't just not bother and let happen whatever will happen. Save our energy. I don't want to feel like this, but I do. Any thoughts? And that's Carl from Monmouth. Oh, Carl, I so get it. First of all, I truly believe that future generations will study the impact of the global lie that was C-19. I have met many people who feel the same way as you do. And sometimes I have felt the same way as well. But I always remember who I am. And that is, yes, I matter, as do you, Carl. You also matter. We have been subjected to an unprecedented psychological assault where we were told to believe that something existed, even if there were no symptoms, even if there was nothing that was perceptible to our eye. This is a psychological assault on us. And not only were we subjected to a psychological assault over the last 5 years, Carl, but our loved ones were. People were not able to visit loved ones. I have interviewed people who watched on iPad as their loved ones in care homes were dying. Horrendous, heinous stuff that, of course, makes us feel powerless. But we're not powerless. That's just what they want us to believe. You do matter. You are valuable. You make a difference. You would be missed. And if anything, I believe that the assault of the last 5 years has really impacted our mental health, and that's what we need to be concerned with. I think it is very much part of the establishment to make you feel as if anything you say, anything you stand for doesn't count. And that expression, what is it, that they fear the day that you realize your power? I paraphrase it badly, but you know what I'm talking about, Carl. And that is what we are dealing with here. And I think that if you are going through this moment when you're a bit like, well, I might as well just let it go, when you weren't previously, and that is that sense of being disempowered. It's very deliberate. I mean, they took taxpayers' money in order to be able to sell us a lie. At the last count alone, it was 120 million pounds that was used by the parliamentary nudge unit to make us believe something was real when it wasn't. Of course, that is enough to make you feel powerless, because if you can't stop such a mega lie, but you know what they say, if you're going to lie, make it big. And that's what they did. And here's why it's important for you to not only believe you matter, but to know you matter, because it will boost your mental well-being. And that's what's been attacked here. You perhaps might need to kind of re-engage with yourself, foster a sense of well-being, because we were told that whatever we did, it didn't help any situation. And we had to let these big overriding powers take charge. Well, that is absolutely geared to making us feel disempowered. But it was a lie. It was based on a lie, and it was a lie. And it attacked us. It attacked our sense of purpose. It attacked everything about us, our relationships, our work, our livelihood, everything. But Carl, I can assure you, you matter, and you matter so much that you felt the need to articulate that in an email to me. You definitely matter. And there's a voice inside of you, despite that assault on your psychological senses, there's a voice inside of you that is there waiting to be rediscovered. You are valuable. Absolutely. But a couple of tips, or not couple, but a few tips that may help you, and I hope they can help you, is first of all, and this is in order to be able to regain your power, be present, be absolutely present in that moment. If you are with someone, give them your attention. And I'm working on that myself, right? In situations, listen actively. All of this will help you rediscover your true voice. Yes, it will. Even basic stuff like expressing gratitude about your life. It could be simple stuff, really simple stuff, that you have heat when it's cold outside. It seems simple, right? But for many people, that is an ultimate luxury. Running water, that's a luxury for many people in our world. Simple gratitude. And you know what, Carl? Send some encouraging notes to yourself. I think I've talked about this before, is when I was going through a downer, when I was really confused about my purpose and what was the point and can we really stand up and be counted against the powers that be, I started to keep a jar, and in it I would put things, kind of happy things that made me happy. Somebody say something nice to me, an act of kindness, anything like that. So send those encouraging notes to yourself, post-it notes, cards, whatever, and do it to other people as well. Look at the people around you. They matter. They matter just as much as you do. Because if you think you don't matter, probably, Carl, you're also thinking they don't matter. So perform random acts of kindness, not only to yourself, but to other people as well. And really important that tomorrow is the 11/11 portal. We hear a lot about this, don't we? There is a symbolic date of November the 11th. It's not just associated with wartime. And it's believed to be a very powerful time for spiritual awakening, for manifestation. And in numerology, it's considered a gateway, a master number. And so, Carl, I think this may well be the perfect time for you to have a spiritual rebirth, because that is also what we're dealing with. Even though we've had a psychological assault, this has also been a spiritual assault on us. And I love anything that has a kind of synchronistic charm to it, and 11/11 does, obviously. But many people, as I say, believe this is an opportunity for a spiritual awakening, for a manifestation, for great synchronicity to take place. And you can think that too. And I hope that even if you don't necessarily agree with that, I hope that just you take advantage of the immediate moment, because this is all we have, right here. The minute behind me is gone. The minute in front of me is not yet here. So all we have is right here, being present in the moment, being present in the moment. And also take action that aligns to your true self, even if it's something simple. Even if your true self is you are a kind soul and you want to contribute more to society, then I don't know, donate some stuff to a food bank. Because even though I have many issues with food banks, there are still starving people. Try and make it a local one, as opposed to like a Trussell Trust, which is a business. And so that's kind of like what I wanted to say on that. And let me just pop up my credits from my Patreons as ever. I appreciate you greatly. What are you saying in the comments? Oh, what's that? Although my name is Carl, I feel for that, Carl, because it's hard waking up. It is, Swiss Miss. You're very welcome, darling. You're very well. And it is, do you know, I actually think that spiritual awakening, because we're fed this idea, right, that spiritual awakenings are all really wonderful, and we're like skipping through, you've got daisy chains around our neck and we're skipping through fields and everything like a 1970s Coke ad where I want to teach the world to sing. That's the idea, that, which incidentally, I love that song and I love the way it's sung in that, but that's a whole other story. But the point is we're sold this idea that a spiritual awakening is a wonderful thing. It's a very hard thing. It's a kind of giving birth. Yes, I'm back on Friday, SMG. Absolutely, I am. It's called a toolbox in therapy circles, right? And great comment. Let me read that. B says, if we didn't matter to them, they'd just leave us alone. Clearly, we do matter to them because they keep coming for us. And that's where our power lies. Indeed, it is. Indeed, it is. Doing small things already makes the world much better than you think. Michelle, it does. And Ray J, you're absolutely right. Most charities have now been industrialized. Absolutely. Which is why I say if you know, something that you want to do is give food to the starving, then just a lot of places now have very small local food banks. But I eventually I will do an investigation into Trussell Trust, because there are many issues there. But don't have time for that right now. So what? Let me just finish off the comments. Have you, Soldier, been awake since 1980s? Good. And you're all welcome. You're all welcome. Thank you for your lovely comments. And knowledge is pain, and that's why it hurts to say no. Completely agree, ADHD. And I am, of course, going to end on a comment, because why? That's what we do around here. And it's an Eckhart Tolle quote, and it's actually beautiful. So I'm going to read it to you. And this is very especially for you, Carl. Lots of love to you. And the quote is, "You have a treasure within you that is infinitely greater than anything the world can offer." And on that note, I will see you on Friday. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you so much. And even when I'm away, like for one show, I'm itching to get back to you. I really am. So wherever you're watching Wake Up, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me in whatever form that you support me. Like, share, subscribe. Obviously, financial contributions are very welcome, because I couldn't exist without them. But whatever way that you can contribute is appreciated. So have a tremendous week, you beautiful people. Peace to you all. Absolutely. Take care, everyone, says the Blue Nomad. And Buffer B said, thank you for a super show today. And thank you, of course, to my wonderful guests. See you Friday, everybody. Take excellent care of yourself. Lots of love to you.